Hey everybody, welcome to the Marquez Says Show. I'm your host, Marquez Mosher, and this is my co-host, cohort, and eldest son, Austin Mosher. He and I always seem to bring out the feisty side of each other, and it leads to some very spirited conversations. There's never really any one topic. We see the world from many different perspectives, and sometimes we agree, and sometimes we don't. Either way, it gets very interesting, so sit back, relax, and have a bit of fun at our expense as we explore some of the most unexpected perspectives you'll ever hear about the world we live in. So, let's get started.
I was right there.
So, hello everybody. I don't know why I started like that. It's just April was making fun of me when I did one the other time like that, so.
I'd make fun of you too.
I know. You always make fun of me.
That's true. It's easy.
So, and with that, welcome to the Marquez Says Show. I am Marquez Mosher. He is
Austin Mosher,
co-host, cohort, etc., etc., etc.
the good-looking one.
Oh yes, because he's genetics. That's where you get it. Say yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
So,
I appreciate that.
So hope everybody's having a great day. We are here. We actually have a slight guest. For those who are listening, you won't understand, but if you want to peek over to the video, we have El Jefe. He's in the room. If you don't actually get to see the video, he is a big hairy blow up with googly eyes.
He's watching his weight. He doesn't like when you use big. He's doing a good job.
Yes, he's doing a good job.
Yeah,
he will be a stand-in for times when one of us can't be here. So, So anyway, I thought a little bit today. We were talking about a lot of other topics in the last couple weeks, but education. What are we going to do about the state of education? Because right now, I think it's safe to say that it's not working. It's from a bygone era. The structure is not what it was intended for when it was originally purposed. We need a change. And I think it links in with all of the things that are happening with the world about how are we really concentrating on the right subjects? Do we have the right emphasis? Do we, is it the right structure? There's been a lot of things, even, recently about elementary schools and studies talking about how don't make the kids get up so early because brains just don't start functioning at early enough, and how it's a waste of time and all sorts of little things. But those are little things. I mean, I know you're wrapping up some of your education. What have been your experiences as you've gone through?
Well, the biggest thing is we undervalue education as a society, as a community. The government undervalues it. Anything that goes it's undervalued so much, and because we undervalue such an essential part of something that we need to function essentially and to function on a high level, we're churning out and accepting people into a system that is not only letting their students down, but letting down their faculty, letting down everybody, because there's just not the resources there, and there aren't any resources there because it's undervalued.
Yeah, and and also, I guess we can even take a step back when we talk about higher education. Although we can have a conversation starting with, from grammar school, but
yeah, I meant just everything. I meant even I wasn't even so much referring to the higher education. I mean more so in the high school.
Well, and I definitely, when you talk about grammar and primary schools and such, you're right, and it starts with just I think the mismanagement and misuse of funds that we do have that go to way too much to the administration and things of that sort, as opposed to going into the actual teachers, and so think about it. If you're not going to pay somebody a solid amount, what's the incentive? Because teachers want to help people, but teachers also need to be able to help themselves. And I've met many, many, many amazing teachers that go into it for 1 to 2 years and then dip, and they do real estate or something. Yeah, you're right, because it's one of those things where you have to have your mind right with anything. We've said that a bunch of times. And if you're constantly getting beaten down because you're worrying about your bills and you're worrying about where your income's going to come from, or you're worrying about the fact that you've got to come up with money in order to buy supplies
for your own students,
that's just it's disheartening, and it burns people out in an incredible amount of time. And you're right, and then they'd leave, and then sometimes they're in some ways those are the ones that are the best because they have the awareness and the recognition of all of those elements, and they're the ones that just say, I just can't do it anymore. The ones that are left behind, they can persevere and they figure out ways to manage, and a lot of them are great
Right.
But
Yeah.
there's also a big section that basically they just accept that climate, and they basically just do
Mail it
what's
in.
what's best for them, and they're like paycheck players. They're like paycheck
Exactly.
teachers, and that doesn't.
And maybe one day they were good, but they lost it at some point.
Yeah, and that can be a gradual decline
right.
too.
And that's a huge thing. I mean, a lot of people. I mean, at my high school, that was most of the teachers, but not all of them. I had some amazing teachers when I was in high school. I was lucky enough in that respect.
Right.
But I had also quite a bit that were clearly mailing it in, and it's sad, and it's a disservice again to everybody.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I can remember a lot. Yeah, I guess a lot of my grammar school, where it was kindergarten through sixth grade for my first set of schooling, and I actually remember going back. I can remember a lot of my first grade teacher, second grade teacher, third grade teacher, et cetera, which meant that they, in a good way, because they were leaving a mark. Then when I went into high school, out of all the high school teachers, I remember just a few, and they were different. They were the ones that really made a difference, and I think that's very telling. By the time I got into college, I can't remember almost anything. There's virtually one or two, maybe, and that's it. And now that's a little bit, of course, on my side, because at that point, it's what you're putting into it.
Invested.
Right. But I think that's a very telling state of it, and and when we talk about the finances and the structure of, say, for K through 12, this conversation we're having right now, we'll start with that it's an outdated form. That was the structure of it, dates to a time almost a century ago, when that was the way we needed it to be, to teach just certain elements, basic elements. But even those elements aren't necessarily what should be primary anymore. I mean, obviously reading, writing, arithmetic to a degree, but even that used to be the critical thinking portion. They used to always argue that that's where you learn your critical thinking. But nowadays, with their phones, the calculators, everything that we have, learning math really isn't nearly as important. Don't get me wrong, we need to, but mainly, you know why we need math? Mainly in the money structure. That's it.
Right. Well, I totally agree. I think that's where, at least in me, when I was in school, that was kind of more so what all the money stuff was. I mean, not money stuff. Math stuff was aimed towards, was dealing with money and stuff like that. I think it's important. No, so what are you trying so
I'm saying basically, so like now there's other subjects. Like, what about teaching, when we talk about money, how about how to actually do budgets? How about we will teach people how to handle money? How about critical thinking? How about emotional intelligence? These things that we talk about once people get to maybe high school or certainly in college and stuff. Right. Those are things that need to be primary back in the day. Where now, if you talk to somebody and said, "Hey, I don't think math," I mean, just put that on paper. If you just said that, I don't think math is important as it used to be, you're going to get a big blowback from almost anybody who's over 20.
I get you. I was trying to see. I was like, where is he going? I was like, I don't understand what he's trying to say. Is he trying to like abolish math? I was like, what is going on? I don't get it. Like, okay.
But that's my point, is that math can be constructed. There was a time when the biggest thing was, you know what? Why do you need to learn math? Because you're not going to have that calculator on you all the time. Right. Well, that's just not true anymore. But we do need to know how to basically, if someone, fractions, 10%, tips, for stocks, for investments, for those who are lucky enough to have those. Basic math can be used essentially for financial. We need to teach financial math.
Right.
I don't necessarily think calculus is going to be the biggest thing that we need anymore.
But we do need stuff like calculus and higher advanced maths to, because we need people innovating, people going into fields of science or engineering or anything like that.
I just mean that those could be more of the electives now. Those were not electives so much before, as much as they were. I
didn't have to take calculus. I only had to get to algebra 2.
But even that, I think, those are like algebra 2 is kind of like that. I don't want to say useless, but that I would have loved you to have that semester or those 2 semesters learning something else. I would have loved to teach you critical thinking, like the classes that I'm doing now that I created and stuff to teach decision making and critical thinking. That true. I would have loved to have you take like a class. Yeah. Like one of the ones that I have are actually it's a 3-month class. It could have literally been a semester, and in teaching that kind of thing.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about.
No, that is a good idea too. Kind of. Well, here, you know what? I want to throw this into the ring because this is something that I just thought of while you're doing that. There needs to be more avenues for kids in school to choose from. It can't just be this one track of doing this because.
Yeah, I think more choices.
Right.
I think we can give more choices, and yes, it would be.
And we can put critical thinking into one of the programs, and then you'll find. Go ahead.
I was going to say you'll find parents dictating it, still dictating a lot of that, but at least there is that option of some parents who may realize, no, I don't care if they get past regular, geometry.
Yeah,
I want him to learn how to. I want her to learn how to.
There should be basic things. I think that you should have to take geometry.
Yeah, exactly. I think geometry.
Yeah. There should be certain things that you have to take. And I know that the current structure is you could choose one or two electives, but maybe you'll take it even a step further than that. What is it that you want to do at the end of the day? Because I knew from 6th grade, okay, I'm gonna go get a degree in audio engineering. Any class that I took for the next 6 years had nothing to do with that. Or two. There was 2 classes, and they were both electives.
Right.
And I could only take them one semester each. And they were great programs, but they were underfunded. They didn't really have teachers that understood what was happening. They were just kind of forced into it.
Right.
And assigned that task. And they were great, actually. They were still some of the ones I remember the most. But... There was just no. I basically, in a lot of respects, and I don't use a lot of those math stuff. English I do use,
right?
But again, that's more so the critical thinking side of things, and to be able to analyze and contextualize. Well, but I spent essentially 6 years doing something I knew I was not going to do with the rest of my life.
And even if you didn't, in your case, you got a little bit lucky because you did discover what you like, a passion earlier on in life.
Right.
But you actually, you're right about the fact that let's have, again, reading and writing, essential, obviously. I have no problems pushing those as far mandated as possible. The math, that's the one that gets a little bit shaky. And then all of a sudden we have... history, of course, history.
Yeah,
but social studies is one of those ones that, sometimes it's history and sometimes it's, current events and stuff. That's a great one to start focusing on, especially right now. Media, like online, what's new, what's real, what's not real. I mean, I had a class in that for my master's program relatively recently, and I'm thinking this media literacy class needs to be taught in 4th, 5th, 6th grade because they're on screens. They need to know the difference about what is this image trying to portray.
Right. And I see what you're saying, and a part of me strongly agrees, but it's also if we start doing that, we say we need to, educate on social media literacy, internet literacy, all that stuff at such an early age. It also, do we want to be encouraging the youth that young, 4th, 5th grade, to be on the internet like that?
Well, there already are, though.
I know, but it's do we acquiesce to it and allow it to keep happening and then enable it and make them smarter users of it? Or do we try to steer them away from that?
Well, you could also argue that, you're teaching them to read. What if they wanted to actually start reading magazines or newspapers? Or, educational ones.
No, yeah, I get it.
It's the same thing, but they still have to have that context. Now, and maybe it starts in high school. Maybe you start or junior high. Maybe you start in 7th and 8th grade because damn well at that point.
Yeah, I could see maybe 7th grade.
So maybe 7th and 8th grade. But media literacy, just basically, the digital literacy, all of those things, they're not standards. Now, maybe some school districts are now, because I have to admit, I am relatively removed. Your youngest sister, she graduated last year, so it's kind of there may be some things coming up from that. But I know that it's not dominant. I know that it's not talked about. Right. And that's something, having kids being able to understand the different functions of what the media does. And when I say media, I'm talking more about just print versus audio versus video versus whatever else. That's what I mean by media.
Yeah.
And then just that literacy, and then the digital literacy or literally image literacy, being able to understand what message is being construed, what message is actually coming through, because so much now is video, so much now is visual literacy. That's the other word I was looking for. So media and visual literacy.
I remember in my AP language class, we talked a lot about rhetoric and stuff like that. What is being said? What is being communicated? Like
subliminal,
right,
not subliminal, but yeah,
reading between the lines.
Right,
Is what you're reading, is this an isolated, like, is this a serious statement? Is this sarcastic? How do you tell the difference? What do you pick up on?
What class did you say that was?
It was AP language.
Yeah,
it's an English course. Yeah,
exactly. It was a class that not very many people are going to get to take. That needs to be, and that was in your senior year,
junior
year. So that's 4 years almost removed from 7th grade. So it's kind of like.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's the point about it. It needs to be done sooner.
Yeah.
And coming back just to the structure itself, the physical structure of school is something that needs to be rethought of, because, you know, you have people in these lines and it's essentially militaristic, and you're supposed to just listen, and you're being taught by a teacher.
You're being talked at. It's hard. Yeah. We talked about earlier is about investment. Like, these kids, what are you going to invest in? Like, what are you giving them to invest in? It's really hard to buy into something if you're being sold something that even the people that are running it don't believe in.
Yeah, and, you know, back to some of that stuff about structure, it's physical. My impression, and I would love for anybody who hears this afterwards and wants to drop comments or has any insights, that the publishing companies are the ones that have been the biggest hindrance to eliminating books themselves, like physical books,
right?
At least for the textbooks, because I don't understand in this day and age why you can't, especially even security features, why you can't give everybody a tablet or a Chromebook of some sort, of a stripped down Chromebook and such, and just allow them to preload everything on it.
Well, it's expensive for the schools to give everybody
But see, that's the thing. They've done studies where you can break down, where I can get a tablet, I can get something like that for $30-$40, even less than that if it was bought in bulk, and it costs them more to buy textbooks. Textbooks that are out of date in a year, 2 years, 3 years. Yeah. And then, of course, the publishers make you want to, you've got to buy new ones.
I do agree that it's the publishers at fault, but there's like two issues going on at the same time. Is the infrastructure that the schools need to have to implement something new, and then the publishers allowing it to happen.
Right, but I think there's no incentive for the schools to make it happen if the publishers aren't going to allow it. So I think it hinges on the publishers, because what's the point of a school investing in trying to change the structure if they can't?
But the school actually has the power, because if the school stops buying textbooks from them...
They can't, though. That's the thing. That would be the exact point. You'd have parents, PTAs, everybody going, what are you going to do? How are we going to teach the kids? If there's no alternative, you have to buy textbooks. You have to buy that stuff from them.
One, the publishers are putting their textbooks online. And it gives you a code, and you log into it.
Right, but that means the students have to have a computer or access to the internet.
Right, I know.
And there's tons and tons of areas where that's not accessible.
Well, right now, too.
And by the way, will they allow that in addition to or in substitute of? Where you don't have to pay for, because that's my point about downloading. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't have to pay the same prices for a published book. So if they say, the book is $19.99, and yes, we have an online version of it, I don't want to buy the book. I don't want to buy it. I don't want to spend $20. Give me a 99-cent Kindle download.
Well, a textbook is going to be way more than $19.99.
Well, I don't know about elementary ones. That they may be,
probably still like $40.
But so therein lies the issue. But if the complete structure of school was rethought about how they approach it, where you sit, how you actually teach, co-teaching versus groups teaching.
I always loved Socratic seminars.
All of that kind of stuff. There's so much, but yet they don't. There's time because of standardized testing, which is a whole nother issue where it's kind of like it's a necessary evil, but it needs to be restructured because you got to have some baseline. We need to have an educated society, so you have to have a baseline. Yeah. But how is the best way to go about it? And there's lots and lots of people out there that are trying to change it. And I don't understand why, A, there is such a resistance, or B, why there isn't more interest in doing so. I mean, I wonder if it's because, but parents, it's a short-term thing. They spend 18 or basically 13 years, and then they don't care anymore. I mean... I would be hard-pressed necessarily to get super involved in my school district now that my kids are out. But on the other hand, 15 years of investment when people or parents or when your kids are in school.
And then also parents have busy lives too. They're going to work, they have other stuff, they're taking care of the kids. I mean, I don't want to place all the blame on parents. I do think parents have some of the blame. But also parents want to trust the school systems. I think we just trust our school systems too much. Well, a lot of people, I think, don't necessarily stop and be critical of it or even critically think about it. And a lot of people forget, too, the whole adage of, adults forget what it's like to be a kid. They do. That's very true. A lot of adults forget what it's like to be a kid. And then...
what you just said actually was a great point, because it comes down to what the light bulb that flashed in my head was, what do we expect schools to be? Because right now... there used to be a time where school was expected to be a place of learning. Now it's a place of care. And I mean, lots of areas you expect to get your food in the morning, your food at lunch, potentially your food at night. You're there, and you're not just being taught classes, but you're also being looked after. So they're raising children, not necessarily teaching children. And that is the parents' fault.
That is the parents' fault. But sometimes in certain communities, though, in certain families and households, don't have the resources to provide some of the things that a public school can.
Right. No, and I'm fine with that, because you're right. That's very regional and very sectional and such. But the what happens, though, and this is why I will harp back onto parents, is that I think they, instead of using that as a bridge until, if there is a time where they can handle it, they use it as a crutch.
Right,
they use it as an excuse. And then those, the power that be, that feel that that is the proper approach that to take to make the schools all encompassing, so that nobody goes hungry and so on and so forth, which of course the intent is wonderful. Right. But the implementation is what is messing things up. And that implementation is where the parents... the parents need to be able to step up and take responsibility, some shape, way, or form, where, that they just don't assume that every breakfast, lunch, and dinner is going to be provided by the state. I mean, that's a hard pill to swallow. And if it's necessary, that's one thing.
And and again, it should be regional, and it should be well, that's the thing. These school districts and all stuff, it's local, it's regional. These decisions should be, from what I see, in my opinion, again, I'm professional in this, I'm not necessarily super educated in this field. It seems like it's pretty straightforward. If somebody truly had the intention, or good intentions for the people they're representing in these districts, it shouldn't be that hard.
But part of what screws that up with what you just said is the fact that a lot of the funding is state and federal. And they are making rules and regulations in order to get our money. You have to do these things. And it takes it out of the local hands. And of course, there's human nature, because even at the local levels, you've got the people that are looking at it as just a way to further their careers, that don't have the best interests of their community. And the people of that community are the ones that need to be able to recognize that and hopefully get them out.
Right.
But that's why it gets so difficult. And we're only talking about just the simple structure, the physical aspect of it, of the schooling. Because then we started to talk about, what are the content? What's the content? How does that need to change, within these schools? Because it's antiquated too. It right now, like you said, you took so many classes that won't necessarily have anything to do with what you're going to do in life. And even if you don't know what you're going to do in life, okay, there's a certain level of up to chemistry, like we agreed, like maybe chemistry, biology, then you've got the math on maybe algebra, geology. I'm not geology. Geometry. But geology would be one of those things that, yes, maybe it could be a forced one, but maybe that's also actually just when the kid who actually enjoys talking about nature and stuff like that. Because maybe there's a kid that just has no interest in that whatsoever, and they'd rather look at architecture. Right. Architecture isn't even taught. I mean, it's not...
and that's something that is greatly underappreciated today. There's a big push right now on the STEM movement,
right?
And or STEAM now. It's STEAM now, but I think the A is to incorporate art.
Maybe, I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
So
this is a great example of that. Since my kids are almost out and stuff, I'm not nearly as in touch. So
It was STEM for the longest time. I think now it's switching over to STEAM.
well, let's look it up. Go ahead.
Yeah,
keep
go ahead and go.
going.
Yeah, but in that push is great. But that push for more STEM stuff shouldn't come at the expense of any of the arts or any of the English, anything like that. You shouldn't be taking away from those programs to give more to this. We need to reallocate certain resources to be able to bolster up everything. What is the number one thing that gets the most money funneled to it at any wealthy school?
Sports.
Right.
Yep.
Why? Why are sports important to our education?
Well, they won't
Why are they the most important thing to our education?
They will call it a community thing. I
Right.
know the argument.
Okay.
But it's not. That doesn't actually go into the education standpoint
Nope.
as much as it goes into. Yes, it's a community function. It brings the community together. But yeah. By the way,
But
STEAM.
why is it the school's responsibility to provide something for the entire community at the expense of its students?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
In those classrooms.
It should be the students focused, and you can have
Right. And-
a lot of times AYSO was a great. There used to be a lot more
What's
of
that?
the American Youth Soccer Organization.
Okay.
And that would be one of those things where you can't necessarily. Well, Pop Warner. There's a lot of organizations that you could actually convert over to the community to go to with sports,
Mm-hmm.
and then be able to redirect the high school football team, or maybe not even high school, but maybe any junior high sports,
Yeah.
and put it into something else. STEAM, by the way, is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics.
Right, and I think they added the A recently
Yeah,
because
it
there
is.
was a push about, well, what about the arts and all
Yep.
that stuff?
So, which is good. I would agree with that.
Right, adding that in is a good idea. Now, does it actually get implemented? We'll find out. But yeah, sports. I am all for sports. They're fun. They are a community builder.
Mm-hmm.
It builds a sense of camaraderie. It teaches you how to operate in a team format. I totally agree that it's a necessary thing and schools should have them.
Right.
Should it be the number one funded thing though? No, it should not.
Yeah,
and you shouldn't
especially at the
be
expense
dumping
of other
in
things.
thousand of what? I mean, some schools.
Some schools, it's big. I mean, we are
Where
kind
the
I mean,
school-
yeah, where you were at, our high
we
school
renovated the whole stadium. We built a gym, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, and that doesn't even scratch the surface for what you would find in the Midwest and some of those
No.
other areas where they're it's even
and
bigger.
can you imagine? Okay, and then also let's talk about this. This money was raised privately into a fund that then gets transferred to the school. So it wasn't coming from the government. So this also talks about something that we need to move into is local and regional distribution and resources, especially of money. Wealthy neighborhoods are in a position to give their schools more, which I'm not necessarily saying is a bad thing. That's just a consequence of
However, what you said, and I don't mean to interrupt you, is that where is that extra funds then going to?
Exactly. So now you've got these.
Where is it being
you
directed
already
to?
have a well-funded school because you're in a wealthy neighborhood,
Right.
so the taxes go into it, thus going into the public school system in that area. So
Right.
you already have a baseline that's better. And then you have other people, parents,
Yeah.
saying, and grandparents, alumni,
Mm-hmm.
saying, you know what? Our school is great. We don't have to invest any of this money into the actual education. I like throwing a football. I like watching that.
Because I like going Friday night, having
Right.
a party and the
Exactly.
tailgate.
Which again, the party is not the problem. But you have parents thinking and prioritizing, hey, I'm going to give this much money to this instead of any number of other things.
Right. No.
And you don't have to give your money. I'm not saying you have to. But just that thought line of, okay, this is what I'm going to give my money to.
Right.
And then they talk about, okay, well, how come...
But Austin, that's because they're glory days. They want to relive those glory days.
But then a lot of times those same people are then, well, it's not like these poor communities. Like when I say poor, I mean not wealthy, not like sympathy toward like, why aren't they in school? Why aren't they taking it seriously? Because what are they taking seriously?
Yeah.
There's nothing for them to take seriously. These schools are different. You have to step outside of your own little bubble, and you have to see what's going on.
Do you remember when you had a sister school, when you went to your sister school in Sacramento, and you were like,
downtown,
that was a huge thing where your eyes just were like,
And
oh
ever
my
since,
God.
I did that as a freshman, and ever since, I have been so hyper tuned in to the differences in what...
It's interesting, you call it disadvantaged, like disadvantaged area, disadvantaged schools. It's right there in the name. Disadvantaged. They don't have an advantage. they don't have the ability to make up, what they've lost with other things. And the fact that so much money is ridden into the sports aspect of it. It doesn't need to be that much. It's not saying that we shouldn't have it. It's just saying that the amount that goes into it isn't proportional or isn't actually even worthy of the cost to the rest of the community. And enough people have to be able to stand up and say, you know what? I love my Friday night football game. I love my, et cetera, et cetera. But you know what? I would really like to see a huge marching band, because that would be the music program.
Right.
Or I would like to see the play. And I don't want it to be done in this some cheesy, chimsy way, because we've got a drama program.
Right, or in a theater that was built 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. If the school even has a theater.
Right, yeah.
And they're not doing it in the gym.
Yeah.
Or people, like, everybody
or
always
art programs, art shows.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Like an actual art studio, or people talking about how, the music is the big thing. We want to encourage, because music is another form of communication and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. How come nobody has seen a studio microphone unless they go into a DMA program in college, if they can get into the college or pay for it in the first place?
Yeah, and you know what? We've kind of covered, obviously, I realize that this is bigger than, I mean, most of all the issues we ever talk about on the episodes are bigger than just the episodes.
Right.
But I just realized that, we talked about how the structure itself, the physical structure of the school needs to change, and how we need to be able to rethink and use the ideas that are already out there to be able to do this. And then, of course, the curriculums need to change. Because this all leads into where I'm going with this, is that once you get into high school, you need to have more preference, like you talked about, having more choice.
Exactly.
Because once you get into college, and this is the other part, to college, not in college, to the point of choosing, we need to de-emphasize college. We need to de-emphasize the need for it.
Right.
Now, 20 years ago, I probably wouldn't have agreed with that. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I still think people would have said, no, I don't think that's a proper thing. However, now the trade schools, the institutes, the technical institutes, the ability, all the programs, all of the those type of schools are better than they used to be. Or maybe they're not better, but maybe they're actually just more known now.
Right. They are essential. We've been talking a lot, like the whole country and probably the world, for the past 3-4 months about essential. Like, we saw when the world shut down who became essential.
Absolutely.
And it was not who anybody... and it was not who would have been said was essential before.
Absolutely. You're talking about truck drivers. You're talking about all of the logistics people.
Mm-hmm.
One area that people totally forgot about is the tech support, because people are all of a sudden trying to get online and having questions and not only do it. Well, who built that infrastructure? Who was holding that infrastructure so that you could have your Zoom meeting with your pants off and your shirt tie on?
Right.
Who was holding on to that? And those people, even there's literally something to be said for the tech industry, having the people on the bottom, the ground level of the tech industry, just like we need truckers, just like we need the people doing the warehouses, just like we need, people creating things like, that are going to then be shipped by the truckers.
Right.
And,
Exactly. I just opened up my store. We just opened a few days ago, and we've had a lot of people coming into the building to check it out, make sure things are good, pest control, HVAC systems, air conditioning, stuff like that. And you know what? I asked every single one of them, oh, did you get to take any time off? No, they were working the whole time. Now let me ask you, if I asked you this 4 months ago, would you have said an HVAC worker is essential? No. Did they go to college? Probably not, but they did go to a trade school.
Yep. They learned their trade probably, and they are actually almost more valuable if you go to some companies.
Yeah, they're more valuable.
And you go to some companies and ask them, that's why there's a big push also for veteran or just ex-military, because of the fact that there's a skill set there that nowadays is so advanced compared to what the kid coming out of college has. That real world experience. And that's the other part about where literally the whole education system needs an overhaul from start to finish. And there's a couple people that I'm friends with on Facebook and such that are trying to create new schools, and it's going to be an uphill climb. But we have to start changing our perspective on it. We have to start changing on, and a lot of this is going to run into problems with, even we joke about, when the 4-year-old, and we talk to the parents and we tell them how different your life's going to be when they go to school, like for kindergarten. And it's like, oh, it's a deep breath of, okay, they're going to school for 4 hours out of the day. I have, my life back. But what are we doing when we start that, when they go to kindergarten? Like for you, it was crazy when we started kindergarten, and this was obviously, 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
Where they were like, okay, go have him sit down and write his name on his name tag. I'm like, what? I was like shocked. I'm like, he doesn't even know his alphabet. I mean, he doesn't even know how to write his name.
Man, I was a dumbass in kindergarten. What the hell? You're having me be I didn't even know this. I'm sitting in front of the class like,
I have proof, guys. I have proof that Austin was actually failing kindergarten, and that over the summer.
Was it first grade?
No, it was kindergarten. Yeah, you weren't going to be promoted, but we have proof because it actually said, do not promote him, basically to first grade. And I said, and the parents at the time, we literally were like, no, this isn't happening. He was already, no. And so we worked with him over summer, and from then on, it was fine, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Superman.
But this is what we're talking about. This is where you have such these high expectations for just going into school. That's great. And then you blow it. Because the system just blows it.
Fails you. Yeah. I mean, I remember my 4th grade teacher threatened to fail me when I turned in advance notice of going on a family vacation.
Oh, I don't even start with the and that approach is what the problem. A lot of it is that schools are so concerned with making sure that butts are in the seats because that's how they get paid, that I had more than one occasion where I was like, the memories and the activities that these kids are going to have by going on this trip, by this, whether it's a family trip, field trip, or other stuff, is by far going to be so much greater than anything they could possibly have learned in that individual class.
Right.
Now, the only time I talk that wouldn't be true, and unfortunately your aunt had to go through it, is when you have a school shooting. And now, and that's a whole nother conversation together, because yes, that memories of that unfortunately weren't going to be better, but they were indeed going to be more lasting and more impactful than if they had gone on a family trip.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we don't want that. That's obviously
that's obviously the bad. Yeah.
But that's a whole nother aspect of the fact that kids. I read an article and it was so sad that the kids were worried about going back to school because they didn't feel like that was the safest place to be.
Well, imagine the trauma from that. I mean, I haven't been in a school shooting, but I was at the mall when there was a shooting, and it's like you have police people coming in with freaking AR-15s and stuff. I wasn't necessarily traumatized because it's like, I mean, I've seen guns before.
You're older.
Right, exactly. I'm older, and it's like, stuff happens.
But an 8-year-old?
Right, like how? Right, exactly. It's like, well, what do you? I'm not like I would be as a parent. I would be scared to send them back too. It's like, well, shit. Like, I know it's not necessarily the school's fault that somebody came and shot it up, but I mean, what do you do? It's scary.
And that comes back to the whole part of the education system needs a do-over, and we're bringing this up, and I think it ties in with all of these other things when we talk about these civil rights going on with Black Lives Matter, and we've got LGBT issues, and all of this is where we need to be rethinking ourselves as a society. What do we want to promote? What do we need to promote? It's why I created like this. The podcast was just something to kind of do and get messages out there, but it's part of Vision Perspective Group, and the whole point of that was literally, was to create a different way of looking at things, because I got tired of seeing everybody just doing the same old, seeing the same thing. I wanted people to see different perspectives, different point of views, because ultimately that is the one thing that I singularly point out that would help everything, is that if we all took the time to look at something from someone else's point of view. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes you're forced, but if you can make it a choice, and then that ties directly into the critical thinking and decision making, because once you have a different perspective, you better not be making the same decisions that you were making before, because that means you have not actually taken the time to process it, to actually look at it from an empathetic point of view. And the things that I do, the things I teach, the things I coach, and it all revolves around that. And I'm getting more and more adamant about it, because I'm getting encouragement that this is missing. and
Yeah.
I'm and that is actually a good feeling. But the education system is one of the ones where we need to look at it from a different perspective. We have to take a different point of view.
The education system is lacking. There are a lot of people within that system that are very good. There's more that are not. And it needs to change. We have to do something.
Part of it is there's some brilliant minds that have come up with ideas, but they get shut down because they haven't been able to get to the point where there's enough people following them, believing in them, and pushing for it. It's the same cycle. It's a cycle that you learn in school about how you have first adopters and then so on and so forth, and then you get to a critical mass and you get to a point where you can, it happens. And it's been, we're decades in on school and we're not even scratching the surface.
There are people in very influential, powerful places that do not want us to be educated. Yeah. They do not want us to be informed. And unfortunately, those people are the ones probably making decisions for us. And they don't want us to be educated because then we'll challenge them and they no longer have power.
Right. And that goes to the political aspect of it, that we need to be an educated society for democracy or a representative republic, whatever you want to call it, to work. And one thing that we have is in the past couple decades, I know that at least that I've been alive, there is a predominant thought process of thinking that it doesn't really affect me. It doesn't really concern me. And that's been happening for a generation or two.
Right.
And now we have a point where we are at a point where it's catching up to us. We do need to go back and to look at and realize. It caught up
to us.
Yeah.
Look at 2020. I challenge anybody in their lifetime to point out a year that has had as many back-to-back events and just world-changing things.
So I would say yes.
I know
more or less.
Giving you an opportunity to go to your.
There's a few years. The one I know what you're thinking of. Yeah. I'll go to that in just a second. But the 60s had a lot more that we don't even know about that happened that were big deals then within that year, like 67, 69, and things like that. But I do agree with you, though, that 2020 is one of those ones where
anybody my age, we were told, 2008, the economic downfall, that was a once-in-a-generation type of thing. Okay, we've had two.
Yeah, I don't necessarily buy that this is exactly the same, but I do agree.
It's pretty damn close, it's not as bad as it's going to get yet.
It's a different effect because you don't have the housing issue that you did with the 2008 one, and that was a huge aspect of it.
Right.
So from a market standpoint, yes, jobs and market, I agree, but from an overall economy.
To anybody trying to start their lives right now, this is a very, very difficult time to do that.
Which brings us back to the whole point of, if you were told, go to college, get a college degree, don't worry, you're going to get hired afterwards. No, you're not, because there may not be an opportunity for it.
Yeah, trade schools, I don't think I said this, or if I did not emphasize it enough. Trade schools are absolutely necessary. They need to be destigmatized.
Absolutely.
There should be no negative view on trade schools whatsoever.
And same thing with community colleges and junior colleges.
And then also not getting a higher education. That should not be a negative either. We should destigmatize that as a whole.
It should be just one of those things that you have or you don't because you chose that it was going to help further your career or not.
Exactly.
It wasn't because of a lack of. It's not a personality default.
No, it is not a personality default. And it's
fault, not default. Sorry, personality. Fault.
Yeah, exactly. And some people won't pursue that, and that's fine.
Absolutely.
Now, other times it might not be fine. They're very well could just be somebody that's lazy or doesn't want to take initiative to better their life. It's not an excuse to be lazy, but if somebody knows what they're doing, they have a plan, even if you don't agree with it, even if you don't see it, they still have the right to do that and be treated as a human and not looked as, oh, you're beneath me.
Right. Especially when you turn 18. At that point, you're supposed to be an adult. So therefore, if you choose to go to college or not, it's your choice. And parents have to start realizing that, you know what? You don't want to go to school? That's fine. Do you want to go to a trade school because you want to be an artist? Okay. And it's a parent's responsibility that if you haven't talked to them about how they're going to be able to support themselves, create a life that they want, pay their bills, but before that, That, again, is the parents' fault.
I agree. And a lot of parents do is, well, I'm going to help you get to this point. You can stay at home with me, or you can, we're going to do all this stuff, and then you're going to get your degree, and then, you'll figure it out. Or maybe you even stay with us even more after your degree, all that stuff. No. Like, some situations that work. Some households need it and all that stuff. Right. However,
there is financial reasons sometimes.
A lot of the times parents say, oh, well, it's hard to live on your own. No shit. It is... language, I could bleep it. Anyway,
I'm cool with that one.
Okay, like, no shit. Obviously, it's hard.
Yep.
You should have done a better job preparing that person for how hard it is.
Yep.
Like, and again, it's not a personal attack. If that works for your household or your family, awesome.
Yeah, obviously. We're talking about the situations where most likely, and what you're talking about, a lot of those situations are households that actually can afford college. They're actually households where the kid should actually be able to go out and handle his business or her business.
And again,
not the ones where it's actually like, I got to go to a JC for 2 years to get my GE so that so that my general education class is my AA because I need to save money. That's the way it should be.
Right. And again, so to go back on it, just in case I don't want to like offend anybody, but I'm sure those households are very loving and there's good intentions, but
it doesn't take away from the fact that it's hurting the child.
Exactly, and it needs to. And again, like, there just needs to be better preparation.
Oh, and one last thing, although as we're wrapping this up, and this can maybe be for another subject because it's going to definitely inflame some people. Quit blaming all of the debt that you accumulate from college on the colleges, because in order to get a degree, you can do it more creatively than going to a 4-year college that's going to charge you $25,000+ a year for you to get the same damn thing that you could have got for $5,000 at a junior college.
That's a very situational thing. This is definitely another whole... Yeah. We could talk about this for a long time.
Yeah,
because
that's
sometimes you have to go to a 4-year that...
Most of the time nowadays, no, you don't. You can actually transfer in. Like within the state system, they've got specific programs that if you go to the JC and you abide by their program, you have guaranteed access to go into as a junior after 2 years to go into the state system. You don't have to.
Yeah, but at a place like Cal Poly for their engineering degrees, where they only let in a certain amount of people every, it
even applies to them because they're within the UC system and they're part of the Cal State system. You can choose any school.
I don't know if Cal Poly would be a part of that.
Cal Poly, it is.
But either way, my point is you have to go there and spend a certain amount of money.
But you don't necessarily have to spend it those first 2 years when you're learning stuff that's not...
Yeah, that is true.
So therefore, you cut your debt in half right there. Now, the other part of it is let's remember, and this comes back to the conversation that we were having right now, was that if you're going to school and you rock up $100,000 in debt for an art degree... Did somebody tell you that an art degree may not be the best way to make money?
That's why I say it's very situational.
Right. But there's parents that will be the ones that were like, no, go to college. Okay, if that's the only way we can get our child to go to college is if they get the art degree, then we want them to do that. You know what I mean?
Raise his hand. That was how I did it. Yeah.
But then it's like, but no, not your situation. The only reason, because those parents
go to college unless
because the parents don't want to have a kid that didn't go to college.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
that's my point. So they're willing to say, go ahead, get an art degree, because now they can at least say they have a college graduate as a child. Mm-hmm. And that just screwed the child over, because now the child is sitting there going, wait, I have $100,000 in debt or whatever it is. I have an art degree, which I love, but I'm now strapped with this. And quite honestly, some of it is the student's fault, because at that point you should start to be able to think ahead. But most of that was because they were programmed by their parents and society.
Programmed is great.
To do it. And
look, and this has been this way of any generation at any given time period since the birth of any sort of governing body. The citizens become programmed to do things a certain way because people with quote-unquote authority have told you that's the way to do it.
You know what? And to wrap this all up, because as we're getting up there, comes back to critical thinking.
It does.
We do not teach critical thinking. We do not emphasize it enough. We either don't teach it well enough, or don't emphasize the good people that do. And that, I think, would change everything. It's not necessarily common sense, although that's part of it, but it's critical thinking and the impact that the perspective and the mindset has on the decision-making process. Because, decision-making is powered by perspective and mindset.
Yep.
And that's That's why we talk about things that are related to that. That's why I do what I do, and that's the crux of it right there.
Right.
So
we hit a stride in that second half.
I know we might have to do a part 2 on this.
Yeah, that was for sure.
So in the meantime, think more, care more, live more, and remember, you can change your life. We can change the world one decision at a time. Anything else, Austin?
No, we said, I think that's good.
Yeah, we did. All right, we'll talk to you guys next time. Thank you for listening.